Hi, hello everyone. It's Thomas from Broad Street Hockey here. We have a special little thing going on today, obviously, with the hiring of Rick Tocchet to be the next Philadelphia Flyers head coach. I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to bring on a dear friend, Jackson McDonald, Vancouver Canucks. Um, I was gonna say,
Impresario.
I was gonna say, yeah, media, but not really, like
Anti-media. Yeah.
anti-media. Of the Roxy Fever podcast, the one of, if not the best Vancouver Canucks podcast you could listen to. So, Jackson, first off, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before, like we started recording that. I think you are the one person that I immediately thought of, just like, okay, if it's anything to do with Vancouver and specifically the Canucks, that is just like you are the person to talk to and just like go in super deep. So hopefully you
Yeah,
have
can
some
I
answers. Yeah,
can I swear? Am I
yeah,
allowed to
yeah,
swear?
yeah.
Okay, good. That's good news. Yeah. I won't bullshit you. That's one
Okay.
thing that's nice. Like I'm not going to pretend I'm like the most qualified or educated person, but I will not give you a bunch of PR hockey man speak about things. And I feel like you're in good hands because I think I might be the one person who follows the Canucks as much as I do, who doesn't have like a really, really, really strong opinion on Rick Tocchet.
Okay, perfect. I mean, that is good to know because, like, it's. I feel like the initial reaction for a lot of the Flyers fans was negativity, and obviously it stems from. I don't know if a lot of people get this impression of the Flyers outside of Philadelphia, but
Sure.
it's they love their Flyers. Like obviously
Right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like a little bit obvious with Danny Briere and Keith Jones, like over the reigns, but like Bobby Clark GM in the past, Ron Hextall GM in the past. Just
Yeah.
like any other coach was Bill Barber for a little bit. John Stevens, like you could just list a bunch of names, and more than basically any other organization in the NHL, former Flyers instantly have a job. Like Wayne Simmons has a job with the Flyers already. Patrick Sharp got brought in. John LeClaire is with the Flyers. Like actually one guy, Jason, who's at Broad Street Hockey, has a running spreadsheet of former Flyers that are currently within the organization. I think it's up to like 20 or so.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, so they love former Flyers. So as soon as they heard Rick Tocchet even mentioned, it was like, no, like I can't stand another one. Um,
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. I think, okay, so obviously I don't have, it's not like I have the numbers in front of me, but
mhm,
one thing that really needs to be said is that every team does that,
yeah,
or at least like most teams do, right? Most teams love former players. They want to put them in organizational roles, and really, I think it's a problem until it's not, I guess, is the way that I would think of
yeah.
that. Like I mean, I'm there's a few people that I'm probably going to return to a lot over the course of this discussion. The first big one is Rod Brindamore,
Mhm.
where it's like I think Rod Brindamore is a really great example of someone who, at least for me, I just let my nerd blogger brain really get in the way, or just make a lot of assumptions about uh that decision, that hire, because for those of us with long memories, the Hurricanes had, at the time, this is going to sound completely insane, but it's true. They were the new hotness. They had the progressive, nerd, smart front office. And one of the thin points of that wedge was, again, it's going to sound crazy, but Bill Peters as the head coach.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to remember who was the GM at the time before Don Waddell stepped in. Was it Ron Francis, or was it
It
someone?
would it would have been Ron Francis, yeah.
Which is kind of funny because now, like, people sort of, they thought much more highly of Ron Francis at the time. I think largely because of Eric Dulski, who of course is now just the man in charge after all this time. Um, but the popular perception when they hired Don Waddell and when they went with Rod Brindamore is that they were taking a step back. They were getting closer to the herd. in terms of the hockey man philosophy and way of looking at things. And at least that's what I thought. I was like, man, this is a team that was really ready to take a step forward, and now I don't know about them. And that was just flat out wrong. Like, it wasn't just a failure of, like, again, assuming just based on, well, they're going with the big, name, the organizational hero or whatever. Hence, it's a regressive move or whatever. It wasn't just wrong on that, but was also wrong on the assessment of the people involved. Because I think I'm not telling tales out of school to say, seems like Rod Brind'Amour, way better guy than Bill Peters, right? Yeah. And that's not like controversial or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I guess the reason I bring that up is that it's one of those things where if you are, I'll take it back to Vancouver as an example, right? If you are really, really into the idea of hiring former players for high leverage positions in your organization, it's bad when it's Dale Talon. But when it's Henrik and Daniel Sedin, it's like, you get Henrik and Daniel Sedin and no one else does, right? And I think, and this is, again, another thing that we're going to return to probably a few times, is at the end of the day, when it comes to most of this stuff, you don't know, and neither do I. And if there's a problem with hiring Rick Tocchet, and I'm not saying there's not, there may very well be, the problem isn't that he's a former Flyer. It's whether or not he's a good coach. So I think step one is set the baggage aside, because the coaching hire is going to be is going to be good or bad based on merit and not based on whether or not they used to be a player for the organization. And this comes up a lot in Vancouver too. Just because a decision rhymes with another bad decision doesn't necessarily mean it is a bad decision. For example, like, there's a big difference between hiring Rick Tocchet, who has, at the very least, good or bad, a very long resume, a pretty, stellar record as an assistant, even if the head coaching record is, we'll get to that. But there's a big difference between that and just hiring, like, I don't know, like, is Pele Lindbergh's dad still alive? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's not the same thing. Like, it is my point, right? Like, it's not like you guys just hired some schlub. You hired, like, probably the biggest remaining name on the market. And that doesn't necessarily mean shit. But it's like I said, that's not going to be the reason this works or doesn't work.
Yeah, like, and you talking about the Sedins also kind of triggered a thing. Like, since they officially hired him, I think it was like 24 hours ago, really. Yeah. All of the marketing, every quote that has been put out by the Briere or Jones or Dan Hilferty, who's above them, has basically been about either talking about how well all stars and star players respect him, and then also about, like, him being a former Flyer. All the Flyers' social media and stuff is like, it's former Flyers. How they leaked or hyped even the announcement before the announcement was a stopwatch, and it stopped at 22, which was his number in Philly.
Right. Okay.
Like, it was a whole thing where it's like former Flyer, like, in their, I think the feature photo on their second news thing, like, just a little more expanded about him joining the Flyers, was a split screen of him coaching and then also him in a Flyers jersey. Like, they're really pushing it, but I think it could be a negative, but you could be seeing as a positive, like, the whole thing of, you get the Sedins because they played for your team. Tocchet chose Philly out of Seattle, Boston, Pittsburgh,
and Vancouver too,
and Vancouver, because he played here, because he has established himself so much in, and I think his quote was like, "Oh, I've always been a flyer." I think that was his thing, and like it could be seen as a positive. Like they were able to get this guy who's heralded and thought of so well because he played here, and it's not a negative as, oh, he played here, so that's why he's here.
Well, yeah, again, it all just sort of comes back to like, look, is the guy a good coach or not?
Yeah.
And you know, again, we can tease this out over the course of the show, but like in a lot of ways, your guess is as good as mine. But the thing about, you know, getting mad about falling in love too much with your own former players or whatever is that, like, if he is the best guy on the market, again, not saying he is, but if he's the best guy on the market, he's certainly the biggest name on the market probably that's left. Then him being a former Flyer is like an asset. It's the reason you got him, right? And I think, I guess maybe the reason why this is on my mind is because over the past few years now, and especially now with Tocchet leaving and the Hughes situation up in the air, the Canucks could really use some guys right now who want to stick around. And honestly, obviously they just made their coaching hire as well, and I promise not to dwell too much on that, but like I think most people had come around on Manny Malhotra as the guy, and part of the reason I know that Vyas and I were selling ourselves on it the last time we spoke on the show is that, you know, one of the advantages with Manny Malhotra is you figure he is probably willing to be here for a while. If things go south, he's probably willing to keep steering the ship as they try to figure things out and potentially rebuild. And, you know, I think it's the same thing with Tocchet to a certain extent. Like, you'd rather, I think you'd rather have a guy who's going to be there through thick and thin, regardless of which direction this thing goes in, than just some asshole, I guess. It's tough, again, because I think the assessment of whether or not he's done a good job everywhere he's gone is pretty complicated. But, you know, look, ultimately, I guess the thought exercise is like, pretend he's just some guy and you're just looking at the record. How would you feel? You know? And boy, there's a lot of ammunition in either direction, I'll say.
Yeah, like you mentioned the record. Obviously, I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but like obviously Tampa. So Tampa was bad. Arizona bad. Vancouver, like when he got there midseason, it was like 6 to 11 points percentage for the 36 or so games, and then obviously that stellar year
last year,
won the Pacific last year, and then 90 or so points this year. And like you said with the ammunition, that overall, if someone wanted to view Tocchet as a negative hire, they could say, well, he made the playoffs once, like the actual playoffs once.
Yeah, totally. Oh, and by the way, as a Vancouver fan, I do love the actual playoffs asterisk because it comes up all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And then, but also you could say, if you want to go from the other side, it's like, oh, well, Tampa was a young team and he coached a 19 and 20-year-old Victor Hedman and Steven Stamkos as they were kind of laying the foundation for the eventual dynasty. And in Arizona, he got more out of that roster than any coach had the right to.
It's Arizona.
It's Arizona.
Nothing that happened there counts. Like it's just like you know, again, like people like to point to Clayton Keller specifically in Arizona as like a you know, a guy that got better after Tocchet left, and I think, I don't know, I imagine people probably do it a little bit with Hedman and Stamkos too. And as much as like, look, after a certain point, you do run out of excuses. Tocchet does have, I think, just about the best list of excuses for why it hasn't gone better of any coach that's that has his kind of record. But at the end of the day, with whether it's Keller, whether it's Stamkos or Hedman or whoever, even, potentially like, I don't know, Lekaramaki, if he pops off this year or whatever, or Höglander, a lot of that is like, hey, did you hear the one about the 20-year-old player who was better when he was 23? Like,
No, exactly.
I'm pretty unconvinced that Clayton Keller got better because Tocchet, someone took the chains off of him afterwards that Tocchet had on. Like, it's not like the team got better, right? It's just the young player who got a little bit older and bigger got better. So, that's kind of the story of Rick Tocchet, I guess, is like the question of how much do you want to hold the relatively shitty context that he was usually dealing with across his whole career now, basically. How much do you hold that against him? And I think it's really an open question because I don't really know how good any of these teams really are that we're talking about. Like, as far as Tampa, is that a team that was held back a little bit, that had talent that maybe could have been good quicker with a better coach? I don't know. That's a tough one. Arizona, I mean, that's even more difficult to parse out because so much of that is just, no one's steering the ship. So, if you're going to pin it on Rick Tocchet, you could ask the same questions about, John Chayka or whoever, anyone in that organization, right? And then here in Vancouver, it's like, I think at this point, if you get a, if you coach the team to like their third best year in history, and you look around at what it's been like for the last 10 years or so otherwise, I mean, it seems like it's pretty impressive. On the other hand, they kind of got lucky last year. And, if you look at the JT Miller and Elias Pettersson stuff, the kind of joke that I keep making is like, how much can you treat something that's like maybe your fault as a bad thing that happened to you? This might be in poor taste and you can cut it, but like, it reminds me a little bit of like, that Eric Clapton song about his kid that like fell out of the window, and it's like, that's very sad, but also maybe it's kind of your fault that happened.
Yeah.
Like, that's like the Elias Pettersson and JT Miller thing. It's like, on the one hand, it's very sad that that it happened and it fucked up your team. On the other hand, like, did you leave the window open? Like, because if you did, then you don't really get to call that a bad thing that happened to you. That's, they're potentially responsible for it, right? And it's the same thing that goes with any of these other young players or whatever. Is it's unless you're in the room, it's hard to know whether it's working or not, and where's the cart and where's the horse, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's it. It's such an interesting conversation because, again, like you said, it could be basically a debate forever of like whether or not you should be giving him some leeway on a lot of his past. But let's get into some of the specifics that you saw on the ice on the Canucks. Like, so someone coming from somewhere that has never watched a Tocchet team play, obviously being on the West Coast is a little bit tricky for a lot of people on the East Coast, but like, what would you say to someone that is in that situation of like, what's a Tocchet team? How do they play like?
Well, it's an interesting one because you guys, you've gone to Tocchet now, and obviously your last like solid head coach or whatever is John Tortorella, a favorite of mine, obviously, maybe not so much as a coach, but
that's a connection we could make later of the whole how's it going from,
I mean, the thing though is that I feel like I don't want to say it's a lateral move, but if I was going to be upset as a Flyers fan that would be the grounds that I think I would be upset on, because like, you know, what's the skinny on Tortorella? Like, it's been a while since he was here, but
Right.
if I remember correctly, right, the thing that people say about Tortorella is like his teams generally work really hard. They have pretty good defensive structure, and the offensive creativity element is maybe a little bit lacking. Well, that was in kind of the story with Rick Tocchet too. The thing that is always so difficult to suss out is like how much of it is the coach and how much of it is the personnel.
Mhm.
And by the same token too, like one of the issues we had in Vancouver, you know, as like fans, as observers with Tocchet, is we would wonder, you know, with someone like, say, Vincent Desharnais as an example, like, is this guy just on the roster because Tockett's obsessed with like big, giant, hulking defensemen who don't really do that much? And, you know, I think from my perspective, if you keep Tocchet away from the like personnel decisions, there's a lot to like. He's clearly a really good communicator. The media loves him, which is not nothing, you know, like
Mhm.
in terms of, you know, he gets a lot of buy-in. I really grew to appreciate his kind of plain spoken demeanor, which I think will be, you know, not again that much of a contrast necessarily with John Tortorella, but he's going to be way nicer, way less controversial. Like there's going to
Yeah.
be way less brawling in the press, you know, at the press conferences or whatever. You know, I assume he like gets in a fist fight at every fourth or fifth one of those things. Like again, just based on my memory.
Yeah.
You know, visually it was not great to watch. It was not really a blast. But again, it's so hard to say what role personnel plays, because I think there's a very strong case to be made that he wanted to open things up
Mhm.
and make the team play more creatively in his final year here, and that he changed tack fast because it wasn't going to work. And you know, it's such a funny thing because this team was what, like 4 or 5 overtime victories away from making the playoffs in a year where they won like 2 games in overtime, right?
Right.
Um, you know, like average results in starts by Artur Silovs. There's so many things you could point to, right?
Well, and just
Losing
yeah,
JT
injuries,
Miller, like injuries, you know,
Hughes injury. Yeah.
all that stuff, right? And they were still pretty close.
Mhm.
And so I guess like here's my second one, that my second guy that I might return to. Alain Vigneault is a guy who I think about all the time when it comes to just talking about coaches and basing everything off of what they've done in the past, because what else can you base it on, obviously,
Mhm.
right? But he's a guy who I think is really instructive in terms of, again, like assumptions about what a coach is going to do and how they're going to be in your organization. Um, and Alain Vigneault, right up until the moment Mike Gillis got hired, the reputation was this guy hates offense. He is a defense first coach. He coaches the trap. Um, he's got, you know, he likes to have an elite goalie, which obviously by that point they had with Roberto Luongo, and just lock it down and win a lot of games 2-1 or 3-2. And then Mike Gillis takes over and they're looking at the coaching position, and he has a meeting with Alain Vigneault, and he's like, this is the style I want to play. He, you know, lays out the whole vision for him. And Alain Vigneault goes, if you get me the players, I'll coach the style. And 2 or 3 years later, the Canucks are the highest scoring team in the league and are up there for several seasons. And he is not just an offensive coach, but like juicing guys for offense. In terms of how he's deploying different lines and stuff. And so I guess the point just being like, I get why he's got the reputation that he has, but at the same time, he coached on Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
You're telling me a guy who like and was known for having like a unique effect on Phil Kessel, who sounds like he should be the least Rick Tocchet player of all time.
Yeah.
So, again, it's just one of those things where it's like, I come into this, I have a lot of information. I don't have a lot of answers because coaches, it just always feels like, how much do you really know just from watching? Like, you kind of really don't know what you have in a coach until they leave and you get to watch someone else do the same thing,
Yeah, totally. And like it is really interesting with the personnel because on the kind of our live reaction immediately when Taka was hired, we like jumped on a live stream and just kind of went over and just babbled on about our initial reaction of, and like it ended up being looking at rosters that were under Tocchet. And then we looked first at, I think we first looked at obviously the very good Vancouver year. And then I looked at that roster and like sorted it by time on ice. And I was like, beyond like having a elite Patterson and Quinn Hughes, obviously, like this Flyers roster isn't all that far away and is arguably deeper. Like we're not dealing with not to like crap on some like depth players, but you mentioned Vinny Desharnais. There's none of those like those players on this Flyers roster that you hate to see on the ice. Like Rasmus Ryan's a joke, like a punchline for so long, but his work under Brad Shaw and Tortorella for the last 3 seasons have turned him into a very like solid, just like your number 4 or 5 defenseman.
He seems again like you're gonna have to forgive me for just I'm so Vancouver pilled.
No, it's fine.
But like he seems kind of like maybe almost Tyler Myers ish.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like a guy who is like, look, a big part of the problem is there's still people somehow like 15 years later or whatever the hell who are convinced that there's like untapped potential that still see like Calder, Tyler Myers as like a possibility or whatever. And it's like, it messes with your ability to see what you have because you just know that there's a chunk of hockey people who just vastly overrate what this player's capable of. But the pendulum almost swings in the other direction at some point where it's like, okay, well, he's not that bad. Like, okay, he makes too much money or whatever, right? I think about like in the back end that's been here for most of the time the Tocchet was here. It was kind of better towards the tail end of this year, ironically. But like, I don't know, Rasmus Ristolainen would, until recently at least, like still be a 4 or 5 guy in Vancouver, no question. Maybe even 3-4. So yeah, like I mean, it's tough because again, I'm not tapped into what the fan base wants or what the general tenor is over there in Philly, but like it seems like if I was a Flyers fan, I'd maybe be like tugging on the collar a little bit, going like, geez, does this team have enough elite talent? Obviously Michkov helps a lot. But you look at center and you don't necessarily see like that guy. At least I don't, right? And so that would worry me a little bit. But if the attitude is like, look, we're pretty close and we just need a couple guys and maybe a coach to harness some of the untapped potential, and then we're looking at like a 100-point team that can be third in their division and potentially play good hockey in the playoffs and maybe surprise people. Like if people are okay with that, I think Tocchet is as good a candidate as anybody out there to get you there. I'm just not really convinced that he's the popular term in the fan base lately is he is a floor raiser but not a ceiling raiser.
Right.
And so I take your pick, I guess, right? Like does that sound good to you? Does it sound bad? Tough for me to say because I'm not steeped in the last 15 years of Philadelphia Flyers hockey. I the best I can say is from the outside looking in, like I do feel like maybe people are a little doomerish on him. Because at the end of the day, like he somehow managed to coach this like dog shit team to a playoff series win, and nobody else has been able to do that for real in a real playoff again with the big asterisk since Alain Vigneault. So shit.
Yeah. Like, and just looking at if you just look at the Flyers roster, the most important players are all under 25. Like that's the other thing of like, it's similar to, I guess, when Tocchet took over Vancouver with Pettersson and Hughes, but it's basically everyone. Like there's a whole third line of Noah Cates, Tyson Forrester, and Bobby Brink last year that played very well and honestly like was being used as more of a first or second line. I think Cates is the oldest and he was 26, but because he did like 3 years at college and is kind of seen as defensive guy and whatever. But like there's all these lines and like obviously you have the Michkov situation and then you have Owen Tippett added and you have Cam York on the back end, Jamie Drysdale, Emil Andre is a prospect that's coming up. Like it's and then you have Oliver Bonk probably coming up soon. Like it's taking that next level that I think they have more current young players that are obviously already in the NHL than any other place Tocchet really had. And then also a next wave of like, we're finishing our, like this draft, they have 7 picks in the top 48 or something like that.
Wow.
So Flyers have a lot of ammunition to do something big, including the 6th overall. So like, they're gonna either trade for a young NHL ready like center, like Marco Rossi maybe or something like that, with those picks, or like just make all of them and be like, okay, that was our addition to the pool. Just wait 2 years until these all materialize, and then we're really gonna be making some noise. And with Tocchet's whole system already established and everything like that, so I feel like it's a way different situation than anywhere Tocchet's coached already.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, again, like I don't have the Flyers roster in front of me or anything, but like if based again just solely on like a vibe, doing a vibe check or whatever, it seems to me from the outside looking in that like as far as talking about elite talent, guys like Quinn Hughes, for example, where it's like we're not just talking about a guy who's really, really good, who could be the best player on the ice any given night. We're talking about a guy who is like good enough that you can say to yourself, hey, the biggest advantage we have night to night is I have this guy and you don't. Seems like that guy's Michkov and there's not really like anyone else.
I would say that. Yeah.
And something I will say about watching him coach in Vancouver is Rick Tocchet's pretty good at centering an entire system around having one elite player. And again, from just, watching these guys compete for him every night for the last few years, he's really not as much of a dinosaur as some people would have you believe. The thing that's hard about watching Rick Tocchet hockey for me is like the style that they play. It's frustrating, or it's been frustrating as a Canucks fan to see all the point shots and to see him kind of preach shot quality in his press conferences and then watch the end product and see the team taking, for some reason, the most low percentage shots, like primarily, right? But at the same time too, it's like you also have had for like several seasons now, we know like your two best forwards hate each other, and it clearly was spilling over into the play on the ice. And you know, I don't want to get too into rumor mongering and stuff like that, but like I think it was clear after a certain point that, you know, you would watch these guys on like the power play, for example, and they're like looking each other off for and passing it back to the point. And you just wonder after a certain point, like, are we actually getting an honest reflection of what Tocchet wants or what the team is capable of, right? So the style element of it, like, look, if you guys get 40 games into next season and you're getting 20 shots a game and the scoring chances are nil, it's not going to shock me, right? It won't. It will not shock me. But at the same time, like, I look at how Tocchet deployed what he had, who his top play or, you know, top ice time players were, how the assignments he gave them. And to me, it looks like a guy who was pretty spot on in terms of his like talent evaluations, you know, like even when Pettersson was playing badly, he was starting him way more often in the defensive zone than in the offensive zone. And he was kind of using JT Miller either as a power for power match with the other team's best players, or kind of trying to get him soft minutes so that he could really, you know, like juice his offensive numbers or whatever. And, you know, at the end of the day, like, you can complain about playing Quinn Hughes 30 minutes a night, but like, wouldn't you do that if you had Quinn Hughes, right?
Yeah.
Like, the talent evaluations seemed pretty bang on, and most guys other than Pettersson, like Niels Höglander, for example, like, he didn't get the time of day when Bruce Boudreau was here. Connor Garland was, people forget this. Connor Garland is such a funny guy because, like, when Bruce Boudreau was the coach, it was like, Connor Garland is useless. I'm tired of watching him spin. We got to trade this guy as soon as possible. He's making too much money or whatever. And then Rick Tocchet comes in, and all of a sudden he's a heart and soul guy. We could never get rid of him. And then you look at the point totals, and they're like exactly the same. And it just like I just shrug my shoulders, like I don't understand it. But like, you know, Bruce Boudreau is a guy who you think of as being like a nice, fun-loving coach or whatever. And again, like a guy like Niels Höglander, like, did way better with Rick Tocchet. So I wouldn't be surprised if, again, you know, someone like Michkov, like, I get that people maybe biting their nails a little bit, worrying that he's gonna, you know, try to mold this guy into try to turn him into like I don't know, Andrew Cogliano or something. And it's like, no, I really don't think he's going to do that. If anything, I think he's going to look at the roster and go, this is my guy. I can't do that to him, but I'm going to need everybody else to stick with the plan because there's only one Matvei Michkov.
Yeah. And I think the best attribute that Michkov and honestly a lot of the Flyers young players have is that they give a shit. Like, I think that is like, that's, I think the one thing that Tortorella kind of sussed out, even like the one major thing that Tortorella had an effect on this roster was I think even Danny Briere and Keith Jones said it was basically like, you are the ultimate decider of who has it and who doesn't. Basically.
Yeah.
Like, and then that resulted in them trading Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee to Calgary because Tortorella viewed these players as like, they're inconsistent, They frankly don't give a shit. Joel Farabee is like the most, like, he could have all the talent in the world, but he frankly like sometimes just floats around. There are months that you don't even notice him on the ice at all.
By the
And
way, just as a
yeah,
side note too,
yeah.
like the guy's been around now for 100 years or whatever, but like how often has John Tortorella been on the wrong side of those assessments?
I mean, very
Like very rarely, you know?
maybe only in New York, and it was only Tanner Glass. Like that was the one player, or
Oh
like that he
yeah,
just loved.
and
But
that's different because like Alain Vigneault loved Tanner Glass too.
yeah,
Like it
yeah,
guys you love who don't deserve it are very different, and I think ultimately cost you less than like where your real mistakes are when you hate a guy and then he leaves and he's
right,
like Cam Neely or whatever, to use the
yeah,
Canucks example or whatever.
yeah.
And I think, you know, Torts has rarely been on the wrong side of one of those.
Well,
And
yeah,
when Tocchet comes in, like if anything, it'll be like, do you want basically all the same like advantages of a John Tortorella, but do you want all your players to be like, oh, this guy's really easy to play for and like we like him, instead of like, Jesus, this asshole again is yelling at me. You
yeah,
know, like again, it's funny to me to, you know, hear third hand or whatever what people are worried about, because again, if I was in your shoes, I'd just be worried that it's too much of the same.
yeah. Like I think on the ice and play wise, like it'd be very. I think it's the result is like the system is going to be very similar, like a 2-1-2 check, like a whatever, like all the neutral zone play and kind of suffocating and allowing points from allowing shots from the outside, but the quality itself is very low, like they're
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But especially with like the main frustration that a lot of fans had about Torts' usage of certain players, especially Michkov, was just limiting their ice time. I think Michkov, like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he played, I think he averaged like 16 minutes a night, but his like per 60 stats were comparable to Connor McDavid's rookie year. Like
Yeah,
it
sure.
was just like insane of just like his rate of production was absolutely like insane at 5-on-5, and the Flyers frankly didn't have a power. That's the other thing of like why the Flyers suck so much is power play and goaltender. Like worst goalie ever in like worst
Yeah.
goaltending ever in the league,
Yeah,
basically.
pretty much. Yeah.
And the power play, they luckily fired Rocky Thompson, who was in charge of the power play, and I think they ever since Tortorella has been linked up with Rocky Thompson in Philadelphia, it was like worst power play, and then another year of worst power play, and then this season they were 30th. I think they improved to 30th.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
better
just
hope. I will say one thing is you better hope that they get a good power play coach.
yeah. Oh, I hope.
Because I mean, the Flyers, it seems like, don't get cheap with this kind of stupid stuff.
Oh no.
So like they're not gonna have like a guy who's like trying to coach the power play from home on Zoom, which is like how the Canucks did it this year, basically. So they'll probably be
Oh,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah, man. But like, you know, with as far as like the Michkov ice time
Mhm.
thing, like that's one of those things where it's probably going to be touch and go, because I think, you know, fans, especially fans that have been starved for wins or fun hockey, they see a player like this and they just want you to fucking let him loose, right?
Right.
And in the short term, they're probably right, in the sense that like, yeah, the Flyers probably do have like 2 more wins if they just play Michkov as much as he's capable of, because he helps them score, and they probably win a couple games that they lost. But in the long term, your interests are to have Michkov be the absolute best version of himself, right?
Mhm.
And so if holding him accountable and shaving a couple minutes off the total ice time are going to get him there in the long run, it's a good thing. The problem is, you know, do you mess with the confidence, or does he ever get there, or do you have to just live with the warts? And again, it's just one of those things. It's tough to know, and from the outside looking in, where those sliders are and how far to push them in either direction. But I would think like a guy with Michkov's level of talent, like you probably do have more to gain from slow rolling it and trying to make him a little bit more responsible than you do from just being like, yeah, kid, do whatever you want.
Yeah, like that's the whole thing of like even the Flyers have been bit by that before with like, and again another Russian player, but like Ivan Provorov was basically gifted first power play. Here's your top pairing because they had no one else, and then he got this ego of like, when I'm not on the top power play, I like sulk in the corner or whatever. So, but I think specifically with Michkov, it's his competitive level and like humbleness also. Like I'm just reading into like what he says to the media
Sure.
in broken English, but like and what people talk, like how people talk about him, is that he will take that extra step and doesn't take that level of critique or restraint on his play as a negative. Like he straight up, like I think when Torch was fired, he said like something about how he kind of regretted under Torch, but then I think another part of him, I think it was earlier maybe that he was talking about it, but like he's really thankful that he was able to be under Tortorella for a year.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's gonna be. I think Michkov is the one player that I think Tocchet is just, from my obviously my like third hand view of it, is like I think he will really gravitate to him and will, while other, I guess this also leads into another question that I had about his perception of certain players, but I view Michkov as more of a Tocchet style player than Pedersen. Like what would, like that's the
Yeah.
a lot of the
I think that's fair.
okay.
Like I think it's, something that's really instructive is that, Quinn Hughes won a Norris Trophy with Rick Tocchet as his coach, right? Quinn Hughes is not, I mean, just again, based on stereotypes or whatever, or what the general opinion is around the league, like heading into last season, are you going to describe Quinn Hughes as a Rick Tocchet player? I don't think even now anyone would describe Quinn Hughes as a Rick Tocchet player. The guy still played him like a number one defenseman, let him loose, practically let him do whatever he wanted as far as I could tell. I mean, there's a level of talent that people get to where, even like Jacques Lemaire, the ghost of Jacques Lemaire, is not going to tell them not to be, like, you think Rick Tocchet's going to tell Connor McDavid not to be Connor McDavid?
Right.
Like these things are never a conversation with the elite, like top 5 at their position players, when you say that Michkov seems like more of a Tocchet player than Elias Pettersson, I would basically say like I'm not that close to it, but it seems that way to me too. I think Elias Pettersson could be a Rick Tocchet player. I think whatever's been going on with him over the past season and a half, basically, is way more complicated than just like, is the coach getting through to him? Something's off there. I don't think that we should view what's happened with Elias Pettersson as a slight on Rick Tocchet any more than I think we should view like, I guess, like Rick, the overall team decline that happened this year, as being solely the result of Elias Pettersson sucking or whatever. Like, I think the whole situation is very, very complicated, and I'm totally buying the bounce back. I believe in the guy, but whatever's going on there, it's not just on one person, I guess is my point.
Yeah, that's good to know, because also like And I feel like that is a lot of obviously like just fans of other teams trying to get a grasp of anything on in Vancouver. It feels like you need like a 10-page document of context of
Absolutely.
historical data and like, oh well, this happened because of this. And some teams it's more simple than that, but I think Vancouver just like you need to be so ingrained and like in the weeds with everything to really get the a fuller,
Absolutely.
even like a fuller picture.
I actually think
Um,
a huge problem with the management group that they hired, probably actually the only real serious problem with the management group they hired, is that they don't really seem to understand the situation that they stepped into. And I don't mean like from a hockey perspective. I think they kind of get it from a hockey perspective.
mhm.
They seem like they don't get it from like a PR culture
Oh,
or of the team and the fans
yeah.
perspective, right? And this is a thing where I think with obviously there's risks with it too, but like where the whole like former Flyer thing isn't necessarily a bad thing, because at least you're going to get guys who are going to come in and are going to get it. They know what the fans are like. They know what the organization is like. Now, it can get to be kind of cultish if you don't have the proper
Yeah,
guardrails or
yeah.
whatever. But, at least you're not going to end up in a situation where like, Rick Tocchet does his first press conference and like doesn't get that, he's coming into a situation where the old coach was prickly with the media, for example.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
he's going to come in and he's going to know what he's stepping into at the very least.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, and obviously he'll have so many familiar faces around him, and like Tortorella, I feel like even the like most casual fan will pay attention to how Tortorella is dealing with the media, and like
Of course.
A Tortorella led team is like just automatically gets more attention than they deserve because the Flyers like were overachieving last year, and then this season they kind of went to their actual talent level, and because of the
Regressed, yeah.
bad goaltending and the real like talent level somewhere in the middle, whatever.
Totally, sure,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like I think it's the awareness of the situation will really be an asset, and obviously I think Briere and Jones are good communicators in that way because, and they are like to your point with the management coming in, they came in like Briere was hired as like he was a special assistant to the GM. Like it was basically he was okay, I don't want to say groomed, but he was like he
No,
was
not in the bad way.
no,
In the
yeah.
yeah, I get
No,
what you mean. Yeah,
literal, like yeah, not literal, but
yeah,
the he was basically molded to become the GM eventually. Like it was a foregone conclusion. Like, oh, we're doing a GM search after Chuck Fletcher is gone, but Briere is hanging around. Obviously, he's gonna be there. And then Jones is like the ultimate PR man. Everyone loves Keith Jones around the league. Like everyone knows him and smile on his face, whatever. Um,
I barely know who he is, and I just hear his name, and I'm just like, that sounds like a good guy.
he was like the long time. He was on TV on NBC down like in Philly for a while,
Yeah, right.
and then like just knows people around the league and like will do podcast interviews for like just like anyone, like, and will kind of just like very like forthright with his time and just
That's nice. Yeah,
yeah, kind of a nice guy. So they are obviously very aware of the situation and doing that, and because under Chuck Fletcher they resisted a rebuild so hard. Like I think it was his first press conference. Bear was like, "We're doing a rebuild." Like actually said the word, and was like, "Oh, he actually said the word like rebuild, and we're doing it."
see, now even just that to me, I think just means that you guys have landed in such a better spot with Tocchet than the
Right.
Canucks did. Because another thing too, this is really crucial context, right? Like again, whether you think he's a good coach or not, it's really, really important to realize that like he picked the Flyers. He could
Mhm.
have gone probably, I don't want to say anywhere, but he could have gone to a
Close
lot of
to it.
places.
Yeah.
And I think I talked about this a lot when he left. I think from Tocchet's perspective, he has to know that he had to nail his landing spot this time. Because if you look at everything that's come before, if this next step for him doesn't work out, he's probably not going to be anybody's first, second, or third choice for a coaching job going forward. If this one doesn't work out, he's going to be the guy who was a one-season wonder in Vancouver and who sucked everywhere else. And so the fact that he looked around at all his potential landing spots and situations and went, this is the place I can go, and I'm going to have the most security, and I'm going to enjoy it the most, and I'm going to have the best results. Like, this is the best landing spot for me, I think says a lot about whether or not it's going to work out. Because he wouldn't be going there if he didn't think that he was like the secret sauce to make all of this work. And if you guys are really actually embarking on like a slightly longer build, I do think that Tocchet is a guy who can potentially be there with you when you're starting that process, and actually, you know, under his stewardship, be able to turn that into a real thing, something that actually has some juice.
Yeah.
And crucially, nothing that happens in Vancouver matters. Like, Vancouver is the place that, particularly for coaches and GMs, where good executives and coaches go and suck, and even players, and then they're good everywhere else, and it doesn't matter. Like, it's, you know, like, how many guys can you point to? Like, I mean, Torts, okay, maybe that's like more complicated or whatever, but like Mike Keenan, Mark Messier, Matt Sundin, like, it's just, you go to Vancouver to suck and make a bunch of money and then go leave and be better somewhere else. Like, so
even the Travis Green led Senators were like half former Canucks, and they made playoffs. Like,
like, they made the playoffs pretty credibly off the backs of like Adam Gaudette and Matthew Highmore. I have this horrible habit of like, I called him Freddie Highmore the entire time he was in Vancouver. It's like a half like I can't remember people's names, and then half like just I don't respect you enough to learn your name.
Right.
But yeah, like it's also very, 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 very crucial to remember that like we're just the bizarro world where nothing makes sense and nothing matters. And so I guess his best year was here, so you have to flush that, but you can flush all the bad stuff too, because nothing matters. It doesn't, the poles never connect. It's just, Vancouver is the zone. Nothing works the way it's supposed to. Different rules.
Like, and that's probably why I'm able to listen to like your podcast and like I hate this team over there. Is like I would like the Canucks to be good for people that I care about sake.
Yeah.
But I also like wouldn't care about the team at all. But I get immensely entertained by people that care about this team. Like, it's so much because it's such a like just a shit show from top to bottom historically. That like I could just listen to a few hours every week.
Man, I gotta just put this out there since you gave me the space to.
Yeah.
Just for the hell of it, the other day, I was curious. I was like, I wonder what team leads the league in losses since 1970. It is the Vancouver Canucks, and it's by like 50 losses. And it's like not even particularly close.
And how many first overall picks did they ever gotten?
0.
Yeah.
They lead the league in losses in that time and have never picked first. It rocks.
I think every Flyers fan just needs to hear that and be like, okay, Vancouver's just like, that's the twilight zone. Like, you don't even need to worry about any result that happened there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that covers a lot of the questions that a lot of Flyers fans will have about Tocchet, like how he'll treat stars and see the stardom in Michkov, and not limit his ice time. And that was the main concern with Torts that people had. General on ice, like I feel, not to go even more, but like I feel like people generally accepted and liked Torts' style, like actually on the ice, just because it resulted in a team maybe it's more last season because they
Overachieved.
overperformed a little bit, but they just like enjoyed seeing that defensive structure and young players able to play that defensive structure very well. So I think just the makeup of this team, I think will suit Tocchet really well already, having that foundation laid by Tortorella. And then I think the whole former Flyers thing, kind of more of an asset, like you just said. He picks the Philly, so it's kind of like a weird, like you could look at it from every which way you really want to,
Kind of
and come
just
up with your
not a
opinion.
point of interest in terms of whether or not the guy's a good coach.
No, exactly.
Just flush it. It's not a big deal. It's not going to be the reason he's good or not. I understand process wise. Does it make you worry about the larger decision making process? That's totally understandable, but it has no bearing on whether or not he's going to be good for you guys.
Yeah. Well, that will be the massive question going forward, and I hope to maybe have a summer that will be interesting, and maybe they'll add more of that elite talent with all those picks they have. But Jackson, just tell everyone what you're up to. King Bob, obviously mentioned that.
Yeah, I got the podcast Roxy Fever. If you just want to like listen to two just like absolutely like I try to think of the right way to put this, but like, you know, if you can imagine like people who've been like up for 7 days and haven't eaten and are like pointing at like the cork board like Charlie Day and the meme and just trying to figure out why things are so bad. If that like sounds interesting to you, then you can listen to Roxy Fever. Listen to us do like 6D chess trying to figure out how to fix this thing.
So one thing I will say is I introduced the Broad Street Hockey Slack to the gay and white player.
It really does work.
It worked perfect. I said Michkov is the rare white gay player.
Yeah, it's true.
And then you go through the roster and we kind of did it. But yeah, so
you could pretty much sort, like, it's pretty funny. Like, so if you just want to hear people talk about hockey in the most pretty much insane way imaginable, and you want to know like what's going on in Vancouver, you can listen to Roxy Fever. And then if you are a person of around my age, sort of early 30s or mid late 30s, and you are a fan of a particular era of like EA NHL soundtrack music. I'm talking Gob. I'm talking Treble Charger guy got canceled, so we'll forget about him, I guess. Or even more recently like Pup. That kind of like pop punk adjacent, but a little bit more grown up, a little bit less like whiny. I listen to King Bob. You found on the streamer of your choice, and I've got a Patreon now where I'm putting all the demos up from like basically just all the songs now when they're written, when they're done, you can hear them way before they ever come out in their sort of original form, and that's patreon.com/allhailkingbob. And I think if you were a fan of the old was it Big Shiny Goons?
Oh yeah.
If anybody listened to that show and followed Thomas here, definitely I think listen to King Bob, because it's definitely got that fusion of like music that sounds like it's made by a hockey person to some extent, and then also like definitely with the psychology of a fan of a terminal like loser franchise. I think you'll find a lot to relate to in there.
Yeah, I think that's perfect for Philly. I'll link all the Patreon, any Bandcamp.
Absolutely. Spotify, whatever.
I'll link all that stuff in the description on the YouTube, and then also the audio feed episode.
Brilliant.
And thank you. Subscribe to all Broad Street Hockey stuff. Read broadstreethockey.com. Subscribe to broadstreethockey.com. $5 a month will get you unlimited access to daily articles about this stupid team. And then just subscribe to the YouTube if you're watching on there. And yeah, thanks for listening. And thank you, Jackson, for joining and taking your time out of your day to,
of course, anytime,
give some knowledge about the now Philadelphia Flyers head coach, Rick Tocchet.
Who looks like Joe Rogan, by the way. That's my last thing I have to get in. Not that I think, given what hockey players are like, that's probably good. I think I think in any other situation, bad. In this particular situation, just immediately commanding respect, being like, I want to hear what this guy thinks about, you know what, not going to go there. But
I think we could expect John Tavares and his amulet to come to Philadelphia in the summer.
Absolutely. Your chances of landing John Tavares went way up.
There we go. And we'll end on that. Thank you for listening, everyone. Go Flyers.